I did put a little bit of thought into this. I'm trying to draft up like how this would work to propose it within one of the first 2 public meetings. And the way I envision it is to have, well, one, this is going to be like the test waters. We're currently looking into restructuring student government board like constitutionally. And, we're one of the only boards in the whole entire nation that has an executive and legislative body combined, as opposed to, a Senate and then an executive board. So this is the test water, will this work? Can we have like this separate legislative body, which would be the representative council, and then can we have, the executive body, which is the board, perform separately? So the way I envision this to work is to have the different STAG groups. There are 9 different student affairs affiliated groups, and that would be like Resident Student Association, Engineering Student Council, Interfraternity Council, all of those different groups, Black Action Society, Asian Student Alliance, be appointed members within themselves. Whether it's the president, they get to choose a representative to come to these meetings. We would also include maybe WPTS and the Pitt Program Council as formula groups. And then we would have several at-large positions. And these at-large positions, ideally one day would be elected positions, but for now, since we can't have an election without changing the Constitution, they would have to be appointed. In terms of who would appoint them, it would probably be like a public interview process, but appointed by the board. That's the only way. First, we have like different, you've heard of the University Senate, I'm sure. And that's, we have different representatives from student government attend those meetings. We're all appointed to those, but none of us actually go to the meetings because we don't actually talk about when those meetings are and whether or not we can actually make those meetings because of class. So these representatives could, that would be one of their functions. Black Action Society could sit on the diversity committee if they would want to. Asian Student Alliance could do the same if they wanted to. So that's one aspect, shifting some of the power and some of the role of student government board to another body to get more students involved. Second would be really to serve as like an accountability type of thing. If this advisory board isn't satisfied with when we make a change to the allocations manual, well, how do we go about that? Right now, we just sort of, all those in favor, aye, and we vote on it, but we don't really reach out to student groups. This would be sort of that mechanism to do so. They would pass a formal motion saying we support this, or we don't support this, and student government board would have to, accordingly respond. Maybe we say too bad if it's something that we really feel is appropriate. Later down the road, it could be something where they actually have the authority to veto or whatever. But again, it's sort of hard to do that now because constitutionally we can't. Yep, so I was on the Constitutional Review Committee for that, so I had a say in, what is on the referendum. In terms of, I look at this referendum as let's give the Constitution a sort of a facelift, something that we can work with. Because, I'm proposing to take it one step further next semester. But yeah, I'm in support of moving from the 5 board members down to 3. I'm also in support of raising the GPA requirement from a 2.5 to 2.75. I'm not sure if that's something that some people don't like because it prohibits students from getting elected who might not be there. But at the same time, the 2.75 requirement, according to Dean Humphrey, wouldn't really exclude that many people, and we're all students first. I think it's sad that there are groups like Pathfinders and Blue and Gold Society that have a higher standard than we do. So we wavered between 3.0 and 2.75, and what we said was 3.0, that's a huge jump, and if we raise it 3.0, there's probably never going to be a time when we lower it. So, let's do a small jump to 2.75, and if future boards feel that it needs to be raised, then they can take the initiative to raise it to a 3.0. In terms of benchmarking with other schools, a lot of them have still a 2.5 GPA, some have 2.75, none that we've seen have a 3.0. Yes, I would say at the end of spring grades, Kenyon should look into it. And, like I said, we're all students first. If you can't keep your grades up, you probably shouldn't be on board. I'm going to say this is going to be a strike against me, but I don't think there is really an enforceable way to have people admit whether or not they're in a secret organization. One being the fact that, I don't know who's in that organization or any, if there are other organizations out there. I urge everyone to be as open as possible about what they're involved in, especially when it comes to allocations things. If you're the president of IFC Brandon Benjamin, who I'm running with, if he gets on board, he will not be voting on the student government or the IFC budget. That will not be happening, and that'll probably be part of the code of ethics that we'll revise and actually make permanent or mandatory, since it's voluntary right now. I think if you're an appointed member of a student group, so like president, vice president, business manager, and you have like an allocations budget that's being heard, that I don't think it should be voluntary. So I think the importance of endorsements is probably overplayed. Like at the end of the day, the endorsement doesn't really mean too much. It's just a signed piece of paper. So I don't think in terms of, like it's not much of, oh, you endorse me, now I'm going to really help you out with different student groups. I think if we just create policies that treat all student groups equal, then that wouldn't be a problem. When we talk, what is within the allocations committee's authority and what is within the board's authority, and those need to be defined. And the direction that I probably would move to is really give the committees more autonomy. It was very frustrating as the allocations chair to watch the board, just newly elected people come in and be like, oh, I want this committee chair, I want this committee chair, I want this committee chair, and they're expected to do this, 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 and this. Whereas there are several people in student government who are on committees who know how SGB actually works and have input that should have been listened to. When Aaron Gish filed that infraction against Gordon, everyone was like in panic mode. But maybe that should happen like it happens in fraternity life, where, once every couple weeks there's something. It's not a big dramatic thing. It's just the judicial committee stepping in and saying, oh, you really don't have the authority to do that. And, we take it, we listen to what they say, it's a balance of powers, and we move on. We don't make a huge big deal about it. You can read the allocations manual and not get anything out of it. If it's your random student group that's new, you read it, and you would have no idea if your request is going to get approved or not, because half the things that we do aren't even written in the allocations manual. So one, we would rewrite the manual to just make it more clear. This would be taking the current manual and just rewording it so that people can easily understand it, so that we can actually understand it. And then step two would be making the actual policy changes. So, if you take club sports, we have a $5,000 competition cap. And it's really unfair when you think about it, because a group might have 10,000 competition expenses and 0 practice expenses, and another group might have 5,000 competition expenses and 5,000 practice expenses. So the one gets 10,000, and then the other one gets only 5,000 because of this stupid rule that we have. And so I think we need to really re-examine that rule, especially because usually the board breaks the rule anyway. 9 out of 10 times we don't even follow it. So look at increasing, all requests under $500 stay within the allocations committee. Maybe it's time to increase that to 1,000. If we're approving 80% of requests, is it really necessary for a group who gets approved to come to the board meeting on Tuesday? And there are pros to cons of that. One, more money would be allocated behind closed doors. But at the same time, student groups wouldn't be frustrated coming to meeting after meeting. The biggest issue is, obviously none of you guys have been in an allocations meeting before. And if we had to conduct that formally, I just don't know if it would be successful. But it's something that we could look into. It's, when we have motions and discussion, it's basically, it follows board meeting, only very loosely, because we have to have 10 people might talk about one request. And imagine if that went public. When I was a freshman on the committee, we were there for 5 or 6 hours. We start at 8:30 and not end until 1:30 sometimes. So I see both sides to it, but I'm thinking that 5:30 or that 5 hours probably, if it was a public meeting where everything had to be very formal, would probably move to 6, 7, 8 hours. You have to look at is really the board isn't supposed to have any part in the allocations decision, and it's in our constitution that the board members are not allowed to attend any of those hearings. So we'd have to make sure that that doesn't happen, just to remove any undue influence on the committee. I mean, it's something we could look into. I'm not going to say that I would commit to doing that. But I would definitely want to hear student feedback on that first. Yeah, I do want to publicize the information about overhead. So I think the overhead increase is a result of like funny accounting that the board doesn't do. It's more of like a student affairs thing, and they take a lot of money. Let's say we have Simplicity. You've heard of Simplicity, the software online. If that costs, let's say, $5,000 a year, it might be earmarked in the budget for $10,000, let's say. So that sets this $5,000 aside that SGB can't touch, but that doesn't get used. And so at the very end of the year, we have this huge sum of money. Maybe Source doesn't use all of its budget. Maybe PMAD doesn't use all of its budget. And all this money at the end of the year comes together and is, gets put into overhead. You also have actually allocations runs in the red every year. The money set aside for allocations is, we spend a lot more than what we have, probably by 150,000. And so it's, how we compensate for that is just taking it out of overhead. I'd really like to audit the Student Activities Fund. I've told Dean Humphrey and Kenyon that I plan on doing that. But just overall big picture ideas, like how much does Pitt Program Council spend each year? How much do they get each year, which we could figure out based on the percentage? And do they really need that much if they have a surplus? We also waste money on renting all the different games at Nordy's. Why don't we just buy them instead of spending $10,000 a year on renting them? That's just... Right. So planning sessions are a time to learn, not to make decisions. Public meetings are a time to make decisions. I think that boundary needs to be put in place. Because right now, we talk, we basically say, okay, we do like a straw vote or something. Hey, is this going to pass? Is this not going to pass? And then we come to public meeting and, all those in favor of cutting the readership or the Panther Prince program say aye, and, everyone said aye. But there was no justification really on behalf of board members. So let's actually wait to have our discussions publicly, and maybe that might mean we have to postpone a decision once or twice a year, or more often than we usually do, and that's okay. Year is really a regroup year. Let's better ourselves, and let's work to restructure ourselves and prove to the student body that Student Government Board can be relevant to the average student.